Everything was going okay. Not easy, but okay. You were coping until you weren't coping. And then suddenly everything went wrong, and then eventually you ended up with an ADHD diagnosis or started exploring on your own. Sound familiar? Hello and welcome to Through the Noise Coaching. My name is Lee and I'm a leadership coach specialising in growing the careers of mid to senior neurospices, and today's topic is a common topic of conversation amongst my clients, so I'm here today to talk about it. It's a familiar story, one that's often seen among adult diagnosed ADHD because a lot of people were missed as children, and I mean part of that is because the knowledge around ADHD just wasn't there back then, something that is better now but still has a bit of a way to go. But the thing was that mostly these ADHD conversations, these things are picked up at school. And so if you're someone who's doing okay at school and not finding it super hard and not struggling, well, then your ADHD is more than likely going to get missed. There are also ways in which school is beneficial to an ADHD brain. And although I can look back and I can spot the ADHD that's always been there, there are a lot of ways in which I think school helped me. One of those things being routine, right? We really benefit from a routine, even though we hate it and we don't want a routine. We actually really benefit from it, and the structure and routine of the school day is really important. We know that we have to be at a certain place at a certain time. There's structure to the lessons involved, there's a curriculum to follow, and I don't think I appreciated at the time how much variety there was in what we were learning and how good that was for my brain that loves learning about all sorts of different things. The lessons were only an hour long, which yes, was past the end of my concentration, but not so far past the end of my concentration that I couldn't get through it. And because I finished my work in time, the teachers often just turned a blind eye while I wrote stories or songs in my notebook. And then by the time that I was really bored and unable to concentrate, it was time to switch something up, to go to a different lesson or a break, and that structure was actually something that I did pretty well in. Many of my clients look back on that time and think that things were different. They were well organised, they coped incredibly well, they probably did actually pretty well at school. They were doing really great up until the point where they weren't. I've started calling this concept the wall and have heard so many different stories of ADHD is hitting it. On the one side, things are going okay, you're coping, even though a life with undiagnosed ADHD is pretty hard, but you're coping okay and things are moving forwards until you hit the wall and suddenly everything changes. Hitting the wall often sparks a series of events that happen that eventually end up leading to an ADHD diagnosis. The wall comes at a different point for everyone. For some people, it's the pressure of the final exams at school that make things start to come crumbling down. For others, it's being responsible for themselves for the first time, whether that's going off to university or starting their first job and having to enter the working world as a responsible adult. I know I am not the only ADHDer that is constantly ground down by life admin. Others get well into their career, well into adulthood, maybe even having kids, getting married, maybe even moving countries before they hit the wall. But the one thing that happens in common is that everyone hits the wall in a pretty big and spectacular way. When I hit my own wall, I was burnt out, I was stressed, I was exhausted from pushing myself in a role that I wasn't really enjoying anymore. But my identity was so caught up in being a successful career woman that I just kept on pushing and couldn't let it go. I saw myself as a Leslie Knope from Parks and Rec, someone who is super passionate, someone who is a super hard worker and wants to make things better for other women and the world in general. Problem was, I wasn't passionate about my career. Despite the awards that I was getting, the promotions, the accolades, I was doing really well. But I was being ground down by it again and again and again until I reached a point where I was at the end of my tether. It only took one trigger to send me over the edge, and unfortunately that was my grandmother passing away. And that took me from a place where I was coping to a place where grief tipped me over the edge and I was very much not coping, and I hit the wall in a pretty big way. Nearly a year later and I was diagnosed with ADHD. Being on the other side of the wall is a bit of a weird place to be. And one of the reasons is because of all of the imposter syndrome that it comes with. Because before I hit the wall, I'd been a high flyer, I'd done incredibly well at school, I'd done fantastically at university, I hit the ground running in my career, and I was doing really well. And I found that hard to reconcile with my ADHD when I saw that there were people out there who were struggling a whole lot more with their ADHD, to the point that it was preventing them from doing a lot of things in life. When there are people out there who never coped with their ADHD as well as you did, it can make you feel like a bit of an imposter, like your ADHD diagnosis is wrong. This is compounded by a lot of attitudes out there about ADHD. From outside the community, but even within the community, there's a lot of negativity around ADHD, and sometimes things are presented as either you have ADHD or you're successful and you can't be both, and that's just not the case. In fact, one of my coaching clients struggled so much with this that he actually went back and asked his assessor because he was sure that they got it wrong. When it came back with saying, no, actually you have a pretty moderate to severe case of ADHD, he almost couldn't believe it. On the other hand, in this post-wall place where we've faced down burnout and we've accepted that we have ADHD, we can also feel like an imposter because everything feels so much harder now than it did before we hit the wall. And we feel like an imposter compared to that high flyer, that successful person that we once were, because it doesn't feel like we're that person anymore. What makes this an even harder pill to swallow is that we can't just go back. We've opened Pandora's box now and there's no putting it back inside. The problem is that we really want to. In some ways we're jealous of that person we were before. That person for whom success came maybe not effortlessly, but much easier than things feel right now. So we want to get back to that person. So we do all the things we're meant to do. We do the burnout recovery, we do the therapy, we do the meditation, we do the whatever it is, because we're used to working hard. So we work hard at trying to get back to where we were, but we can't get back to where we were before. And I know this is an uncharacteristically bleak look at ADHD from my standards. I tend to be someone who's fairly positive, although overall neutral around ADHD. But the reason why I'm saying it like this is because that's how it feels at the time. When you've immediately hit the wall, you've got your diagnosis and you're trying to get back there, the fact that you can't feels pretty bleak. Hitting the wall is incredibly hard. It's one of the hardest things that I've been through, to be honest. But the good thing is, I know that even though we can't go back to the past, we can move forwards. And I know that because I've lived it and because my clients have lived it as well. And actually I've noticed that this is when my clients tend to come to me. They're in that post-wall stage, they've done the healing, the therapy, and they know they can't go back anymore. They know that they need to move forwards. They're just not sure what moving forwards looks like yet. One of the hardest things for them is that they don't actually know what they're good at anymore. They know what they used to be good at, and they know what was working on the path that they were on, but the path that they were on was a path that led to hitting the wall. And so they don't really want to follow that path again. And you can see why this leads them to feeling like they're unsure of what they're good at. Another thing is that their ADHD is now front and center. They have accepted their diagnosis. And while throughout their career so far, they may have followed the typical career advice that's out there that is very much aimed at people who don't have ADHD, and maybe they managed to make some of it work, now they know that that path also leads to burnout. And so they want a way forward that takes that ADHD in mind and moves them forwards in an ADHD friendly way. They want to be successful again, but in a way that works for their brain, in a way that works for them. So that's what we set out to do. Much like my own post-wall recovery, I work with clients to find what they're good at again, to look at what worked for them in the past, what they want to keep moving forwards, and what they want to forget and leave behind in the past. I work with them to help tackle that double whammy of imposter syndrome. The imposter syndrome that stops them accepting themselves and their ADHD, and the imposter syndrome that keeps them stuck and not moving forwards again. We tackle both of these things because I've been there and I know what it's like. And for me, the way forward involved entrepreneurship, involved building a business in something that I'm really passionate about and feels a lot more meaningful. For others, it's a complete career change or just a new start and a new company. Or maybe it's going for that role that they've always wanted but perhaps been a little bit too scared to make the move for. Or maybe, despite the burnout and everything that I've just discussed, maybe they did actually manage to end up where they are and they love where they are. And so it's just about finding a way to move forwards in that space in a way that does work for them so that the burnout doesn't become a recurring theme. Maybe they need to tackle the imposter syndrome so they believe they deserve to be where they are instead of feeling like a fraud all the time. Because hitting the wall isn't the end, and having ADHD doesn't mean that you're stuck. And if this video resonates with you, then I believe that you can make it to the other side of this and you can come out to a place when you're thriving again. I believe that because I've lived it, and I believe that can happen for you too. Because you and your ADHD are pretty amazing, even if you don't feel like it right now. I know that that's true. And if this video does resonate with you and you feel like you need a little bit of help with this, then I regularly open slots for one-to-one personalised coaching. You can head on over to my website, ttncoaching.com, to find out a little bit more about it and send me a message if you want to know some more. This topic is one that I'm sure I'll come back to, because there's so many people out there who are not ADHD enough to receive ADHD support, but are definitely struggling with things and do need some support. So if you're one of those people, then welcome. This place is for you. You're welcome here. But for now, I'm going to leave this topic here. Please like, comment and subscribe, and if you haven't seen it already, you might be interested in going back and watching my video, You're a High Achiever, Could You Also Have ADHD? Thank you for your attention today, and I'll see you in the next one.